All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be delving into the realm of blood. We're going to be looking at the Blood Domain Cleric, which those of you that have been watching for a while, or those of you that have just gone into the D&D Deep Dive list and looked, I've actually covered the Blood Domain Cleric before. But, again, as I mentioned before, excuse me for 1 second. Water. As I mentioned before, one of the issues I had with the original Tal'Dorei campaign setting was, for the most part, once the subclasses and character options were printed, they were never revised again. With the one exception of that being the Way the Cobalt Soul monk. And that was specifically because Marisha played it in Campaign 2. And the original version that's in this book is just not well designed. To the point where the one that they put in for Marisha is almost completely reworked. So that's one of the things I've been enjoying about campaign setting Reborn is... that Matt was given a chance to rework a lot of the ones that were in the original book to make them just more playable. Now, the Blood Domain Cleric wasn't unplayable in its base form. I mean, the Cleric itself without a subclass is a remarkably resilient class. Full casters in general... you can actually play them without a subclass and not feel horrendously underpowered. You won't feel very special, but that's the thing about magic in the D&D in general is it's really hard to have a full caster once you get probably about mid-tier 2 up to, and definitely once you hit to tier 3, to feel underpowered. Just because... magic is powerful, and depending on your spell list, it's remarkably versatile. So I'm not saying that the old version of the Blood Cleric was bad. I'm saying this is definitely a step up, and I think it changes it from something that was kind of interesting to something that is unique and could be a lot of fun. So, quick reminder, if you enjoy this stuff, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on. All of those things are really important for this video to be seen by other people. That being said, let's dive into this. Now, quick reminder for 5th edition class design. In 5e D&D, every class is designed to play very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, every class has these things that we call defining features. A defining feature is either something that's unique to the class, or maybe it's not unique to the class, but the class can use it differently or gets it earlier than other classes. In order for something to be considered a defining feature, it has to show up in the first 2 levels. So, what are the defining features of the Cleric? Well, probably the biggest is Channel Divinity. Now, like I mentioned before, defining features are either unique to the class or are different than other classes. And Channel Divinity is an ability that the Cleric shares with Paladins. They both get Channel Divinity. The difference being, a Paladin's Channel Divinity is a one-and-done ability. It refreshes on a short rest, but it's still a one-and-done ability. The Cleric's Channel Divinity starts as a one-and-done ability, but once they get to 2nd level, or 6th level, sorry, once they get to 6th level, they can use it twice per long rest. And once they get to 18th level, they can use it 3 times per long rest. So Channel Divinity tends to be a little bit more used by clerics than it is by paladins, just by design. Another kind of unique thing is all clerics have the same Channel Divinity option available to them, or one of the same Channel Divinity options available to them, which is Turn Undead. Which is effectively an extremely useful kind of super fear they can use against undead creatures. And when they get to high enough levels, they can instantly just disintegrate some low-level undead creatures. All the rest of their channel divinity options come from their subclass, which is where the other kind of defining feature of the cleric comes from, in that they choose their subclass, which is called their divine domain, at level 1. So they actually have, in some of them, one of the defining features of the class is built into their subclass, because it will massively change how the class is played. With that being said, and also, of course, they are full spellcasters, because they are divine spellcasters. They actually have, every morning they get to prepare a number of spells, but they have access to the full list of cleric spells available to them that they can prepare. Yeah, let's dive into this. So, the first thing that you get, which is how all clerics get this with their divine domain, is you get domain spells. Domain spells. A lot of different classes get extra spells when they level up. Or access to extra spells based on like their subclass or something like that. And they come in a couple different flavors. Some are your spell list is increased to where these options are available, but you don't have to have them prepared. And the other flavor of that is, hey, these are spells that you just always have prepared. And for domain spells for clerics, they are just always prepared. For the blood domain, they do make some slight changes, which I think make a little bit more sense when you think about blood and everything like that, and how blood literally is going to power some of their abilities. So the original list, at first level, they had Sleep and Ray of Sickness, and now they've switched out Ray of Sickness for False Life, which again, I think just makes a little bit more sense. Ray of Sickness is an interesting ability because it's basically a debuff. And I guess you can kind of link that, and I'm guessing that's what Matt's idea was originally, was, making their blood sick in some way might make sense, or sickness related to blood. I just think False Life makes a little bit more sense, in that you are using blood to kind of buffer their hit points effectively. They switch out Hold Person for Crown of Madness, which is an interesting kind of trade. Hold Person is an extremely powerful spell, but it's also a spell that is on the cleric spell list already. So theoretically, all that meant was, with Hold Person, it was just a spell that you always had memorized. Or here they have Hold Person. Here they in the original book it was Crown of Madness. So yeah, and again, that does make more sense when you really think about it. Is Hold Person, again, being able to basically freeze their blood so that they can't move, kind of makes sense, or like hold on to their blood so they can't move, compared to Crowd of Madness, which Crowd of Madness is just not an exceptionally useful spell, to be honest. It sounds kind of useful, but it really turns into it modifies the action economy a little bit, and that's it. And then 5th and 7th level are exactly the same, and then Ninth level is the same as well. So yeah, they just switch out 2 spells, and they both kind of make a little bit more sense. Again, it's not as nice that Hold Person is already on the Cleric spell list, so this isn't giving you access to a new spell, but it does mean you always have Hold Person prepared, which is none of nice. So yeah, domain spells make sense for the class. Additionally, at 1st level, you get bonus proficiencies, which is just you get proficiency with martial weapons. Which is meaning that cleric domains generally come in 2 different flavors. You have melee focused classes or cantrip focused classes. And basically all that means is when you're not casting leveled spells, what are you going to be doing? Are you going to be hitting someone with a weapon, or are you going to be casting a cantrip? And generally the way you can tell the difference is the weapons-based ones will generally give you bonus proficiencies in some way. Sometimes it's in martial weapons. Sometimes they will also give you bonus proficiencies in heavy armor, since as a weapon-based class you are going to be going forward. And then at 8th level you will get an ability that either improves your weapon attacks or improves your cantrips. So when we get to 8th level, we'll see which one it is, but we can kind of guess just from 1st level. So pretty simple there. Finally, the last thing you get at 1st level is Bloodletting Focus. When you cast a damage dealing spell of 1st level or higher whose duration is instantaneous, any creature with blood that takes damage from the spell takes extra necrotic damage equal to 2 plus the spell's level. So this isn't a massive thing. Like, even a 9th level spell, you were looking at 11 extra points of damage. It's not that big a deal, to be blunt, but it is something, which is nice, and it is a slight change from what's in the original book. So in the original book, they didn't have whose duration is instantaneous, and I think that created some issues with spells that allow you to continue doing damage by concentration. Something like Witch Bolt, for example. With that, without the whose duration is instantaneous, theoretically this becomes a significantly more powerful ability, because every time you would do damage with multi-turn damaging spells, you would get this additional damage, and that is a really big deal, especially if you upcast something like Witch Bolt or something like that, because the higher you upcast it, the more your additional damage, and in general the more damage the base spell is going to do anyways. So I can understand the process behind kind of putting that extra stuff in there so it didn't become massively broken. And something that a lot of people don't realize about clerics, because when they think cleric, they think, oh, that's the healer. Clerics can do crazy damage. Clerics can lay waste to a battlefield almost as effectively as a wizard. Again, full casters in general can be really deadly in 5th edition, depending on your spell choice. And while, yes, clerics do have a lot more spells that are geared towards support and healing and control kind of things, they have some devastating damaging spells. And when you start mixing certain spells together, combining concentration with non-concentration spells, they become really effective damage dealers. This, again, it's kind of pointing you towards the idea that the Blood Domain Cleric is going to be a little bit more focused on damage with the martial proficiency, with the Bloodletting Focus. You can start getting an idea that this is going to be a bit of a damage-focused class. So, moving on to 2nd level, you get Channel Divinity Crimson Bond. Now, this is, again, when you, for clerics, all clerics get turn undead as one of their channel divinity options. Their second channel divinity option is always decided by their subclass, and some clerics also get a third channel divinity option. Some do, some don't. This one will. And the reason that I'm mentioning that is in the book, they actually flip the channel divinity options, because you get one at second level and then you get one at sixth level. And what they did is they flipped them and modified them enough that they are really, really different abilities, despite being basically based on the same things. The modifications make them very, very different. So the second level channel divinity is what used to be the sixth level channel divinity, and it's called Crimson Bond. So for the one that's actually in the Tal'Dorei Reborn, this is the new version. You can use your channel divinity to form a supernatural bond with a creature you can see, or with a creature for which you possess a blood sample. This bond lasts for an hour or until your concentration is broken, as if concentrating on a spell. So, important point, this is effectively a concentration spell. Remember that. While the bond's in effect, you can use an action to learn the target's approximate distance and direction from you, as well as its current hit points and any conditions affecting it, as long as the target is within 10 miles of you. It's really nice for tracking. Alternatively, you can use your action to attempt to connect the target's sentences. You take 2d6 necrotic damage, and the target makes a con save against your spell save DC. On a successful save, the bond ends. On a failure, you can choose to either see or hear through the target's senses for a number of minutes equal to your wisdom modifier, minimum 1 minute. During this time, you are blinded or deafened, respectively. With regards to your own sentence, when the connection ends, the bond is lost. Regardless of the outcome, the target feels a wave of unease pass over it when it makes this save. So, let's compare this to the original version. Now, again, the original version was a 6th level ability. And the first kind of difference is this one, it just said, or with a creature for which you possess a blood sample. That's really, really simple. You need a sample of their blood, which may just be the blood that you got from cutting them. You know, really, really simple, easy to understand. In the original book, it was actually a sample of blood from a creature that is at least 2 ounces and that has been spilt no longer than a week ago. I don't quite understand why he felt the necessity to add that in there, simply because there's not a whole lot of situations where you're going to be able to find blood that is over a week old anywhere. By the time blood has been sitting out for a week, most of it is evaporated. It has started to rot. Like, this already would have been not necessary, because you're generally not going to find blood that's just been sitting in a place completely undisturbed for a week. So yeah, I'm totally on board with him just removing that aspect, because it just was needless description. And then, for the most part, there's not a whole lot of change after that. It was really just, make some modifications to that, and then they reworded some things to make it a little bit easier to understand. And I believe in the original one, yeah, no, it's almost identical. Like I said, the big difference is they shifted it from a 6th level ability to a 2nd level ability, which I'm actually fine with. As a 6th level ability, like, this already has a remarkably limited amount of use, because it requires you to either be able to see them, and they will know when this happens, because specifically, and I believe this is new as well, the last line here, regardless of the outcome, the target feels a wave of unease pass over it when it makes a save. They will know some sort of magic spell has been cast on them. They may not know this particular divinity, because maybe blood clerics are a rare thing in your world, or maybe just people don't understand what blood clerics can do. Like, this is kind of a creepy thing to do. Maybe the blood clerics keep it on the down low. But they will 100% know that something has happened, and a sufficiently paranoid person is going to treat this feeling of unease as, oh, nothing has fallen off. I don't feel like I'm physically hurt in any way. I must be being observed. So that does put a little bit of a limitation on it. However, in situations where you do need to keep track of someone, this for an espionage style character is an incredibly useful tool. Specifically because not only do you get to know exactly where they are, and basically you can tail them from around corners and from, with buildings in between you. So they would never be able to tell that they were being followed, because they would have no way to tell where you are or anything like that. And then the ability to see through their eyes or hear through their ears can be remarkably useful. If you're trying to figure out a way into a secret hideout or something that may have a trick panel or something like that, or the door is trapped, being able to simply see through their eyes, you can watch them sit there and go, okay, I push this button, I pull this lever. If you're trying to get information, being able to hear through their ears means that you can find out information that literally someone would only tell this other person, because you can just hear through them. Now, you can fail, but I think that adds just a little bit more weight to it, because this could be incredibly useful in very specific situations. Now, because it is a very specific ability with very specific uses, like, this is not something I think I would ever see someone using in combat. So this is entirely an out of combat ability. I'm actually fine with it being 2nd level instead of 6th level. 6th level, it starts to feel like, what's the point? And once we talk about the 6th level one, you will understand why. So, yes, that is Crimson Bond. Moving to 6th level, you get Channel Divinity Blood Puppet, which again is was printed in the original one, but again, they've flipped it. It used to be a 2nd level ability. It's now a 6th level, and they've made it significantly more useful. As an action, you target a large or smaller creature or corpse within 60 feet of you that has blood. A creature you target must succeed on a Wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC or become charmed by you. An unconscious creature automatically fails its saving throw and isn't incapacitated while you control its actions. A corpse targeted by this effect gains a semblance of life that you could control. On the affected creature or animated corpse's turn, you can command it, no action required, to move up to half its speed and use its action to do one of the following. Interact with an object, make a single attack, do nothing. An animated corpse or an unconscious creature takes its turn immediately after yours, but can't move or take actions unless you command it to do so. Its statistics are the same as when it was alive or conscious. An affected living creature makes a new saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. For any target, your control lasts 1 minute or until your concentration is broken, and at 17th level, you can use this feature to target a huge or smaller creature or corpse. So, there's a lot here. First things first, let's look at how it was in the original book. As an action, target a large or smaller creature. Same thing. Creature must succeed in a con save, or immediately move up to half their movement speed in any direction of your choice and make a single weapon attack against a creature of your choice within range. Dead or unconscious creatures automatically fail their saving throw. At 8th level, you can target a huge or just a smaller creature. So, the big difference with Channel Divinity Blood Puppet from the book to this is, in the book, this is a single thing. And really the only useful thing about it was you got to get a single attack from an enemy, generally against another enemy. And that's it. It didn't make them use their reaction or any actions on their turn. It was just extra stuff. And for the most part, that's not that useful. Creatures that can make attacks are generally going to have multi-attack. A single attack is generally not going to do a ton of damage, but once you start getting 2, 3, or 4 of those same attacks, that's when it starts getting really, really bad. But the original version of the Blood Puppet just gave you a single attack. It's just not that useful. Especially as you get to higher levels, and single attacks are just significantly underpowered because on a regular attack action, the creature would make 3 or 4 attacks. Blood Puppet in Reborn changes that. Now it's a concentration skill. So again, you can't use concentration spells while you're using either of these Channel Divinities. But this does 2 major things that are different. First things first, it lasts for multiple turns. The creature gets to save out of it, but as long as they keep failing their save, which if you pick the right creature, they will, you basically have a little buddy for up to a minute, which I mentioned before. 1 minute in 5e combat is 10 rounds. A single round lasts 6 seconds. 10 times 6 is 60 seconds, or 1 minute. Most combat in 5th edition ends after about 5 to 6 rounds. So this is for all of combat, or until you lose concentration. That's a big deal. We've talked before about action economy. Action economy is the single most balance affecting thing in 5th edition combat encounter design. And whichever side has more actions, and that includes actions, bonus actions, move actions, reactions. Whichever side can do more things is going to have at least a slight advantage. Even if you're a party, of, level 7s going up with challenge rating 1/2 wolves or something. If there's 10 wolves, you are going to be at a disadvantage, despite the fact that half of them won't hit. Despite the fact that when they do hit, they don't do a ton of damage. The fact that they simply have more actions than you puts you at a disadvantage. So that being said, not only does this give you a little buddy for the remainder of a fight, unless they save out of it, you also get to force it to use its action. And this is a massive thing. Actions are the big things that you did to do in combat. Most spells are actions. Multi-attack takes your action. A lot of other things take your action. Being able to force your Blood Puppet to use the action for what you want is really, really nice. Now, it does limit you to make a single attack, which, again, in certain situations, that can be useful. If you somehow get, like, a Blood Puppet, a giant, let's say. Giants do have multi-attack, but they still have really powerful single attacks. So in that specific instance, it's not a bad idea to make them make a single attack. Interact with an object can be a little bit more situational, but there may be some situations where that's very, very useful. Making the enemy go and open the portcullis for the rest of your party is going to be a lot easier than fighting your way over the way over yourself. Or if you're on the other side of the portcullis, as long as you can see them, you can make someone on the other side be able to open it for you. So those are very situational, but in those situations, very useful. The final one that I think a lot of people will undervalue is do nothing. Like, well, why wouldn't I want to make them make a single attack or something? Well, Generally, when I see do nothing, my first thought is spellcaster. Spellcasters are bad when you are fighting them. They do a lot of damage. They tend to stay away from combat as much as they can. They have a lot of different ways to mitigate damage, control abilities, things like that. Like spellcasters are some of the most difficult creatures you're going to fight in D&D. So do nothing literally forces them to waste their action doing nothing. So you're trading possibly a 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th level really horrible spell for them to do nothing. And since you do get to have it move up to half its speed, something you could easily do is make it move half its speed just past your enemies, which would provoke opportunity attacks. And this is something that a lot of people, I guess not a lot of people, some people will misunderstand the idea of what quote-unquote forced movement is. Forced movement is when you physically move someone against their will, as in you grapple them and pull them, or you push them away with a thunder wave. That is forced movement. Controlling someone and commanding them to move and then following you is not forced movement. Their body is doing the movement on its own, and therefore they may not be making the choice to do it, but they are physically, their body specifically is physically moving their body. You are not forcing the body outside of its own autonomy to move by actual application of force to the body. And because of that, you can cause the creature to run past enemies, and it will provoke opportunity attacks, because this isn't forced movement. Because again, forced movement is using force to move the body, not the body moving under its own musculature, under its own ability to move, whether or not they were commanded or forced to do it in some way by compulsion. As long as their body is the one that's moving, it will still provoke opportunity attacks. So with this, you can literally provoke a bunch of opportunity attacks, and then have it just park right next to whomever does the most damage, and then have it sit there and do nothing. This is an extremely effective way to deal with clerics, to deal with enemy clerics, enemy wizards, basically any spellcasters, especially ones that use concentration spells. Yeah, just so many useful things for that. And I really think that is going to massively change how you play the character. Again, you get 2 channel divinities per short or per long rest. Even just one of them being used as a blood puppet at the right time can switch combat. It also means if you want to use Channel Divinity against a legendary creature, you need to find a way to get rid of all its legendary resistances. And that's where something like a monk can become really, really useful, despite the fact that none of the stuns will work, because no boss monster is going to allow themselves to be stunned. Going up, stunning them, getting them to fail, so they have to use their legendary resistances. Once all the legendary resistances are gone, you can blood puppet them and then go to town, because once you take away their action, even if it only lasts for a single turn, taking away their action is a really, 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 really big deal. Being able to control some of their movement is a really big deal. So yeah, get your use out of Channel Divinity Blood Puppet. This is a beautiful control ability, and I love it. Moving on. Also at 6th level, you get Sanguine Recall. You can sacrifice a portion of your own vitality to recover expended spell slots as an action. Spell slots can have a combined level equal to less than half your cleric level, rounded up. And none of these slots can be 6th level or higher. You take a d8 necrotic damage for each spell slot level recovered, which can't be reduced in any way. You can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. And then they give an example. This is another thing that was in the original book, but they do make some minor changes. So one of the things they do is, it used to be, the original wording was you immediately suffer 1d6 damage per spell slot recovered, but it doesn't give a damage type, so it's just generic damage. This one specifically, you take a d8, so it's a little bit more damage, necrotic damage, so a specific type of damage, for each spell slot level recovered, which can't be reduced in any way. That's the other thing, is theoretically, you could get resistance. You could there's a bunch of different ways that you might be able to limit that, and that is one of the limiting factors of this ability, is that it needs to be something that actually does damage to you. That's the whole point of it, is you have to make that choice of, can I afford to lose some hit points in order to gain some spell slots back. That being said, otherwise it's a very similar ability. I do find it slightly interesting that a subclass that has kind of already shown, hey, you're going to be using weapons in addition to your spells, is also giving you the ability to recover spell slots. Yeah, it's interesting. It makes perfect sense. I just find it a little bit interesting. And I guess that's kind of true of most cleric domains that do have that Devine Strike, where they get extra damage when they hit with a weapon. It's still a full caster. You're still going to be casting a fair amount of spells, even if you do bop them in the face every so often. So yeah. Overall, though, really useful. I like the fact it's limited to 6th level. It's limited to less than 6th level, because they specifically say none of these slots can be 6th level or higher. So it limits it to below 6th level. And I think in the last one, no, that's the same in the original book. There are kind of 2 power levels when you're considering spell casting. When you get to 3rd level, the difference between 2nd level and 3rd level spells is astounding. That is why you don't get 3rd level spells until you reach 5th level. That's tier 2. There's just a huge jump in power and usability. 3rd level is when you start getting things like Fireball, Counter Spell, other things like that massively change how the game works. There's another big jump in power, which is 5th level to 6th level. And that is because half casters only get up to 5th level spells. So there is no there's no way you're going to get a half caster that can cast 6th level spells unless they are a multi-class, which causes other complications as far as how quickly they learn get spell slots and things like that. But because of that, 6th level spells, they really just kind of open the throttle up and let them go. And then as you get to 7th, 8th, and especially 9th level spells, those are really game changing. Like 9th level spell, Wish, can literally change reality. It is the most powerful spell in the game. Most 9th level spells are in similar power to a Wish spell. That's why they're all 9th level spells. So yeah, limiting this to 5th level or higher makes sense. Letting clerics just be able, especially since clerics can heal themselves really easily, letting them be able to just burn blood whenever they want. This doesn't have to happen in combat. They can just burn blood and get back really powerful high level spell slot that would be broken just in general. So yeah, overall, I like this. It means the cleric can cast even more spells, which if you combine that with Bloodletting Focus means it can do more damage. There's a lot you can do with this. So anyway, moving on to 8th level, you get Devine Strike. And this is something that wasn't in the original subclass, and I may have commented on that back then. I actually can't remember. It was almost 2 years ago I made the last video on Blood Cleric. So, but yeah, this is something that every Cleric domain has, either Devine Strike, or I can't remember. I'll see if the other Cleric level in here. Yeah, Empowered Cantrips is the other one. And it's basically Devine Strike on each of your turns. So specifically on your turn means you don't get this extra damage when you make an opportunity attack because it's not on your turn. You can cause the attack to deal an extra 1d8 necrotic damage to the target. When you reach 14th level, the extra damage increases to 2d8. And this is once on each of your turns. So this is a one-time thing. So even if you get multi-attack, which this one doesn't, some mage subclasses do, you get to do additional damage. Now, Cleric cantrips level up. So a lot of people were going, well, this doesn't really make sense because, you know, if I do Divine what's it called now? Radiant something. The standard Cleric cantrip that I can't for the life of me remember right now. Anyway, if I do that, you know, by 8th level, that's already doing 2d8 damage. 11th, it'll be 3d8. 12 and I think 17th. Yeah, 17th, it'll be 48 damage. So if I'm using like a Warhammer, which makes, or a longsword to use easy numbers. Longsword's a d8, the extra damage is d8. So 2d8 means you do similar amounts of damage. But then at 11th level, you're doing less damage. And then 14th level, you'll be doing similar amounts of damage. And then 17th level, you're doing less damage. Well, that's where you have to start considering other factors. Most Cleric cantrips are save spells, which means you can't crit on it. Whereas a weapon attack you can crit, which will double the damage. And because these are dice that are being added to it and not a flat bonus, that means the extra damage is doubled as well. So Divine Strike allows you to crit, which is nice. In addition to that, Divine Strike also allows you to get weapon effects. If you have a magic weapon, that means that you can get additional damage or additional things to happen when you hit an enemy with that weapon that you can't get using a cantrip. There are no magic items that will do on-hit damage for a cantrip. Whereas there are tons of weapons that do additional damage or have additional things that can happen if you hit a target with the weapon. Divine Strike, again, there's pluses or minuses, but in certain situations this is going to be extremely useful, especially if you get a decent magic weapon for your Cleric. So don't undervalue, even though it's a full caster and a lot of your spells are going to outclass even critical damage hits, don't completely ignore the fact that your Blood Domain Cleric can do some pretty powerful stuff when you get to the Divine Strike and combine it with other things, especially things that give you advantage or expand your critical range, things like that. Nimbus of Pathos from that Tragedy Bard, combine that with the Divine Strike and something like a flame tongue weapon, and you've got yourself a pretty powerful thing that uses no limited resources. There's no spell slots you have to burn for it. This is just damage. So yeah. Finally, in 17th level, you get Vascular Corruption Aura. For a minute, any hostile creature with blood that moves within 30 feet of you for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there takes 3d6 necrotic damage. If a hostile creature with blood regains hit points while in the aura, it regains only half as many hit points. And once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. So, one and none ability, but a pretty useful one. Comparing it to the original book. The big difference is it does more damage. In the original version, it was 2d6 necrotic damage. In this version, it's 3d6 necrotic damage. Everything else is pretty similar. They changed some wordings around a little bit to make it slightly easier to understand, but that's really it. And it's a useful ability. Automatic damage is useful for a number of reasons. Concentration is the one that I always bring up because that's the big limiting factor of spells. Anytime a spellcaster takes damage while they're concentrating on a spell, they have to roll a concentration check. Eventually, if you make a caster roll enough, if you make them roll enough, they will eventually fail. Statistically, you are eventually going to roll under what you need. That being said, just extra damage in general is useful. And this is 3d6 necrotic damage. At 17th level, 3d6 is not a massive amount of damage. It's still a nice amount of damage. And it's anyone that's within 30 feet of you. Again, because this is a little bit more weapon-focused cleric, going forward and attacking, having this Vascular Corruption Aura on means you can actually do a lot of damage with this. Combine this with like Blood Puppet, and you can do a decent amount of damage and then set up the enemy to just get hit even more. Blood Puppet someone and bring them into your aura, and then have your party just destroy them and rinse and repeat. Yeah, a lot of really, really useful things. The other thing that's nice about it, it is not a concentration effect. So you can have this on and have something else going on simultaneously. If you really want to be a horrible person, combine this with Spirit Guardians casted at high level, and they just start taking crap tons of damage, because they will take 3d6 necrotic damage from this, and then as much damage as you can get from Spirit Guardians. I'll actually, I can't remember the exact damage right now, but let's just check to see. Spirit Guardians, 3rd level spell. Again, 3rd level spells change things. It's a concentration spell, but with Vascular Corruption Aura, it doesn't require concentration. They take 3d8s, either radiant or necrotic damage, depending on your alignment. And then when you cast a spell using a spell slot of 4th level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot level above 3rd. So 3d6 necrotic plus minimum 3d8 necrotic or radiant, and then casting it at, like, let's say 5th level, which is the highest level spell slot you can recall using Sanguine Recall. That means every turn that a hostile creature, and Spirit Guardians, you can just choose creatures that are unaffected by it, so neither of these are ever going to hurt your allies. They will take 3d6 plus 5 d8, which if we use average rolls for them, average roll in a d6 is a 4, so that's 12 damage. Average roll for a d8 is a 5, so that's 25. 12 and 25, that is 37 damage for free against every single creature that you don't like within 30 feet of you every turn. And that's not using any of your action or anything like this. Like, you use your action to cast Vascular Corruption Aura, and you use an action to cast Spirit Guardians. So that's effectively by turn 2, you can have this incredibly deadly thing going. And if you know that combat is going to be starting before it actually starts, you can cast one and or both of these before combat starts. And again, 1 minute is 10 rounds. So the likelihood of Vascular Corruption Aura is going to be for the rest of combat. Spirit Guardians last 10 minutes. So that's 60 rounds. Spirit Guardians, you can start that well before combat starts, and then still have plenty of time left on it, so that your first turn you can just Vascular Corruption aura, go forward, and then just start wailing on people with whatever you want. So yeah, again, use the right spells and combine them in the right way, and you have got some pretty impressive damage ability with this cleric. So, final thoughts. Overall, I like this. I like it a lot better than the original version of the cleric. They make some changes that just make the class more useful. They got rid of the one big exploit that was built into it in Bloodletting Focus, and then switching up Crimson Bonds and Blood Puppet, I think makes a lot more sense. And making Blood Puppet actually useful as a control option means that you have a really, really good choice as far as what you want to do with your Channel Divinity. Crimson Bond is mostly going to be out of combat, but Turn Undead is an extremely useful thing for any cleric. And then Blood Puppet is going to be an extremely useful thing in just so many different situations. So yeah, overall, I really like the Blood Domain Cleric. I think, specifically with Blood Puppet, I think this is probably one of my favorite cleric subclasses now, because it's just really interesting and fun, and I want to see stuff like that. So anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, remember, like, subscribe, turn notifications on in the comments down below. What do you think would be the coolest kind of visualization of how your blood spells are cast? In the beginning of the character options section in this, they have a whole section that's called Hemocraft, where they talk about, maybe some of the issues you might have with, some people just don't like blood. So they talk about the idea of blood in session 0 and self-harm, kind of the things like that. Make sure you talk about that with your other players and your DM before you start doing stuff like this. But they do talk about how you can kind of flavor your spells to effectively be cast using your blood. And I think that's really, really cool. Or controlling people through their blood. I think it's really interesting. So if you're not too squeamish and you don't have problems with that, what do you think would be the coolest kind of visualization of a cleric spell being cast using blood? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, this is all for me today. I'll see you guys next time. All right, bye bye.